let's do a little fact checking on this. You say that the tax cut started in 2012 and President Obama was in the White House, and you are right. But I think you might want to go back and look at who actually led the charge to cut the IRS's budget. And I think it was the Republicans, but I'll do this one for you. Either way, can we agree that those cuts to the IRS budget were a terrible idea, and that the IRS needs enough money to close this tax gap so that they are actually able to enforce the tax laws that are currently on the books? We're not even talking about putting more laws on the books. Just enforce the dang stuff that's out there.
I am totally for the IRS being able to enforce the laws given to it. Of course, in any budget, trade-offs have to be made. And so if folks decide to spend money here as opposed to the IRS, then that is something which is a priority that Congress made. I'm not sure I would blame Congress, though, for a budget which the president signed.
Well, fair enough. But let's just stick with what we want to do now, because the one thing that's very different about spending money with the IRS is that it actually brings in more revenue. And so the question is, how much more revenue? And I understand that you object to my calling people who don't pay the taxes that are legally owed tax cheats, but I don't know what else to call.
Can I reply to that? Because
of course you can.
Mr. Gamage tells us that indeed most folks are not paying taxes because of laws that Congress passed.
No, but that's not what the IRS commissioner was talking about last week.
Well, that's different what Mr. Gamage is saying.
What Mr. Gamage was saying is $1 trillion in taxes that were owed but not paid. People who owe taxes and don't pay them, to me, that's the definition.
Maybe we need Mr. Gamage to clear up my misimpression or your misimpression, because I had a sense that, as Professor Hope says, Congress has punched a hole in the bottom of the bucket. And whether it is EV tax credits, et cetera, but people with wealth are not paying taxes because of provisions that we placed. And I think I heard from Mr. Gamage that the amount that is legally avoided is far greater than the amount that is illegally avoided. But if I'm wrong, please correct me, Mr. Gamage.
No, I think that is what Professor Gamage said. The point is, let's just stop at least the part that is already legally owed and making sure that people are actually audited, especially wealthy people, and that they are audited more often than poor people, and that we collect the taxes that are owed. That's all I'm doing here.
What I don't know is if the poor people, or people like me, are audited because they just have a computer program that kind of runs through and says, here's a guy with a W-2 and not much else, so therefore, I do have some stocks, et cetera, but somehow relatively easy, versus that which requires going out and looking at people's books. If you're saying turn off the computers so that we're not going to look at that which we can easily look at, that doesn't seem very wise.
No.
On the other hand, we certainly should treat all Americans fairly, no matter what their socioeconomic class.
Good, and I think that is the point. We want to make sure they have enough money to be able to go after the complicated tax schemes that the wealthy are able to use and the big corporations. So I just have a couple of questions I want to clean up as we do this. We've heard a lot today about my wealth tax, including about how it would help close revenue gaps and grow the middle class. We also heard some criticism, so I want to take the opportunity to get a few more things on the record. Let's get some clarity about how a wealth tax could be implemented. Professor Gamage, a few of your fellow panelists have argued that it would be too hard to implement a wealth tax because we're unable to value the assets of wealthy individuals. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely not. Now, any tax system is going to be imperfect. A wealth tax would not be perfect, but it would be not hard at all to design a wealth tax that would do dramatically better than the existing income tax, much better, as targeted to the ultra-wealthy mega millionaires and billionaires, as the proposed wealth tax would do. The majority of wealth is held in the form of stock and other publicly traded assets that are easy to value. And along with tax professors Darian Shansky and Brian Galley and economist Emmanuel Saez and assistants from the Roosevelt Institute, I've been working on a model set of valuation and enforcement rules for wealth tax reforms based in part in the successful Swiss wealth tax experience. The proposed ultramillionaire wealth tax would give Treasury the authority to adopt our proposed rules, or perhaps to come up with something better. I'm extremely confident that the proposed ultramillionaire tax as implemented by Treasury would do much, much better than our existing income tax at measuring and valuing and enforcing wealth, or the true economic resources of mega millionaires and billionaires.
So thank you, Professor Gamage. Let me just look at an example of that. Dr. Disney, how much of your wealth is in stock and other property like that?
Most of it.
Okay, and how much is in one-of-a-kind, hard-to-value Disney collectibles or other things that are hard to value?
Very little. It's in my experience, very rare for a wealthy person not to know exactly where all their money is and how much everything is worth.
You know, there are plenty of tools available to value the assets of the wealthy. They are constantly being valued in the private market and for insurance purposes. The IRS values these assets when the wealthy die. And if it's really true that there are some billionaires whose wealth is so immense that we don't even know how to start counting it, then that is the best argument I've heard all day for a wealth tax. I have another question I want to ask about. A few of the witnesses suggested that taxing book income, like my real corporate profits tax or President Biden's tax plan, would cause corporations to manipulate their financial statements and to try to find the same kind of loopholes they now do in the tax code. So, Professor Gamage, do you think that giant corporations would be willing to report lower book income so they could avoid paying a 7% real corporate profits tax?
You have to start by remembering that profits reported for financial accounting purposes, as I think every tax analyst agrees, are currently inflated. They're inflated because inflating them gives managers higher compensation in stock options, among other reasons, and drives up share prices. The Real Corporate Profits Tax Act would deter these financial shenanigans, and that would be good. And reminder, the best research in the academic literature suggests 50% book tax conformity. We currently have 0%. The Real Corporate Profits Tax would move us to 25%, a significant step in the right direction.
Okay, so would it be a fair characterization to say that by applying a tax to a number that corporate executives want to have as high as possible, that a book income tax would serve as a backstop to the existing loopholes in the tax code?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Now, one last area I just want to hit, and then I'll give this back to Senator Cassidy. Some of our witnesses have suggested today that a wealth tax and a real corporate profits tax would reduce economic growth. Professor Gamage, we're back to you again. What kind of impact would these taxes have on our economy, in your judgment?
I think they would help the economy and especially help shared economic growth and prosperity and leveling a playing field. The big problem in our economy today, as our economic research finds, is not on the supply side, lack of resources seeking investment. Interest rates are historically low. There's massive funds seeking investment. It's on the actual investment happening in a variety of ways. These tax reforms would help with this by, on the public side, through greater public investment, but also by deterring some of the tax planning shenanigans, which make it so that instead of productive investment, what we see happening is excessively convoluted structures designed to minimize tax, some legal, most legal, but some illegal, but regardless, wasteful, economically harmful, and the overall tax reduction that the ultra-wealthy get away with and large businesses through these structures stands in the way of real economic growth and prosperity.
Well, these taxes would raise as much as $6 trillion that we can pour right back into communities and families all around this country. We can make serious investments in good jobs, in strong infrastructure, in quality child care for every family. Those are investments that help families get ahead. And when families have the support they need and the jobs that pay fair wages, they can spend a little more at their local businesses and maybe start a small business themselves. Senator